music theory, we toss this term around, often without second thought about what it actually means or entails. Well, it's pretty simple, isn't it? Music theory, it tells us how music works. It explains why music works the way it does. Or does it? Well, I think you can guess my sarcasm for a moment, and yes, I am actually challenging this definition of music theory and what music theory actually is. Well, to get us started, let's look at a definition of what music theory is. So we're just going to go to Google, and I've got Google over here. Quick Google search. It says, theory, a supposition or a system of ideas intended to explain something, especially one based on general principles, independent of the thing to be explained. Now that's of course reasonable. I'm not challenging the definition of theory here, but I am wanting to discuss a little bit further about what we understand today as music theory and whether it truly is music theory as the Google definition tells us. So to do this, let's draw our attention to what we actually do study in music theory, or specifically Western music theory. So in any good Western music theory textbook, you would find information like a scale is comprised of 7 notes, and a triad is comprised of 3 notes stacked up in intervals of thirds. Or maybe if you go further, a very common chord progression is the chord number 1, or the tonic chord, which moves to the subdominant chord, chord number 4, which then moves towards chord number 5, which is the dominant chord, which really feels like it wants to resolve back to chord number 1. And that's part of your music theory, Western music theory. So I could list many more examples, but that would amount to writing a music theory textbook, and that's not what I'm going to be doing today. But these examples that I've listed, we realize that actually it does tell us how music is structured, because we find scales built up of 7 notes in so many songs, so many pieces of music. We find triads, chords used in music we hear on a daily basis, and the chord progression, the 1, 4, 5, 1, that is so common in the music that we listen to. So the thing is, music theory, all these things, they tell us how music is structured. But does it actually tell us why it is this way? Why are there 7 notes in a major scale? Or why are triads consisting of 3 notes, and why are they stacked up in thirds? Or why is the chord progression 1, 4, 5, 1 a popular and so-called good sounding chord progression? So we realize that music theory actually deconstructs some of these compositional techniques that have been used for centuries by amazing musicians and composers, and it tells us what is being done so that we as learners can repeat it, can study it, and use these techniques for our own music making, or just to appreciate music better. But again, if we stop for a moment and think about what the music theory information the textbook is telling us, it is telling us how music is structured and it's arranged, but it's not telling us the why. And even if we go further, and maybe it's a really detailed music theory textbook, and it tells us for the chord progression 1, 4, 5, 1, it goes into a lot more detail, saying chord number 1 is the tonic or the home chord, and it is wants to move to the subdominant function chord, which is chord number 4. And the reason why it's a subdominant function chord is because there is more dissonance, creating tension. And this subdominant function chord wants to move to chord number 5, which is our dominant function chord, which has even more tension, and it has the maximum amount of tension in the diatonic scale because of the tritone relationship between the 4th and the 7th scale degree of the major scale. And therefore this increased and high amount of tension wants to resolve back to the tonic chord, because the 4th degree wants to go down to the 3rd degree and the 7th degree wants to go up to the 1st degree, and both by a semitone step. Alright, so that's a detailed explanation of it. But does it actually tell us anything about why why does the 4th degree want to resolve downwards to the 3rd degree, for example? Or why does dissonance in our chord actually create tension that wants to resolve to what we call consonance, or the lack of dissonance, or something that sounds a little bit more approving to our ears based on what we've been used to listening to? So at the end of the day, all this detailed information, it seeks to justify the chord progression 1-4-5-1 as to why it has existed and it continues to persist in music that's been created for centuries, and up till today it's still being used. But it doesn't tell us the why. It tells us the how it's been done, but it doesn't tell us why. Why is the tonic chord the tonic chord? Why is the subdominant chord the subdominant chord? And even if it tries to explain because of tension, it doesn't tell us why tension creates a sense of movement. So what I'm getting at is that music theory is actually not music theory in itself. It is more like the art of composition. How have composers for centuries created music, and we've listened to it time and time again until we're so used to it and we enjoy the sound that we've sort of given it a stamp of approval, and today these techniques have found their way into our music theory textbooks. And that is perfectly fine in its own right, just that it is not actually theory, it is the art of composition. And what we're learning is learning from best practices, how music has been structured for many, many years, so that we can learn from these best practices and create music by ourselves, on our own, or just improvise or appreciate music. But if we want to actually delve into theory, music theory as how it's supposed to be, then we have to start explaining the why. And this can be done by looking at natural phenomenon that's happening by the mediums that create music. So for example, if we take a guitar string or our vocal folds or any vibrating medium and vibrating it at 440 hertz, meaning 440 times per second, that gives us the note A that we have designated in Western music. And if we choose to double that frequency from 440 to 880, that gives us the note A an octave above it. And that is an example of how we can use natural phenomenon to explain the auditory sensations that we get in our ears. And that is sort of the correct way, in my opinion, of how music theory should be approached. And I think that it's really beautiful because we are looking at natural phenomenon, and it's the truth, it's just there. We can't change the fact that doubling the frequency, it produces the sensation of an octave, a note that sounds really, really similar to the note half the frequency below it. So if we see music theory as using natural phenomenon to explain why music is structured and done this way by composers for generations, then we'd have to explain why our scale has 7 notes and why these specific frequencies are selected out of the infinite variation of frequencies, and why that sounds good to us or why it doesn't sound good to us. And I guess that's what music theory will really be. But that's an incredibly difficult task, and it's one that I'm not going to attempt to answer today or to tackle today. Instead, I hope that I have challenged your assumptions and sparked your creativity, and maybe you'll be interested to explore further on how we can actually explain the why in music theory and not just the art of composition or the how. And for me, this has been a very, really interesting intellectual pursuit, and allows me to have a lot more appreciation for my art as a musician that I really stuck to. Understand why certain notes sound good together and why certain don't, and not just understanding that it's been done this way for centuries, therefore it sounds good or it doesn't, but trying to find the natural phenomenon and the natural laws that govern the musical sound that inform our appreciation or lack of appreciation of these musical sounds. Now, what's interesting is that we've only been talking about Western music theory so far. And in a Western music theory textbook, you'd find things like chords, scales, keys, time signatures, harmonic progressions, and so on and so forth. All these really detailed and intricate stuff. But if you go beyond Western music, for example, to Indian classical music, you will find the concept of harmony virtually non-existent. And because of this absence of harmony, the elements of melody and rhythm go absolutely wild, and they're so complex and intricate and so beautifully developed over centuries. And it's amazing to just delve into that and understanding theory. If you're talking about music, natural laws, understanding the natural laws that govern these musical sounds, this is transferable between styles and genres. Because if we study theory based on how we're studying it now, we're learning about triads, we're learning about chord progressions. That's non-transferable to, say, Indian classical music. But if we learn about the reasons why these chords sound the way they do, then we can take these same laws and transfer them to a different musical culture, and we'd immediately be able to pick out why this Indian music is structured in this way, and why the natural laws allow this certain form of music to sound good or sound pleasing to different communities around the world, and why perhaps us as an outsider to a different culture are not able to appreciate it that much because we've not been exposed to it. So here we're talking about universals in music, where, for example, what we talked about earlier, the octave, where we double the frequency. That's something that just happens in nature, all around the world. It doesn't matter what musical culture that you are in. Of course, how you describe it might be different, but the auditory sensation will be the same, the doubling of frequency. And this transferable nature of our knowledge between genres and styles is so intriguing and so exciting, and it allows us to unlock music beyond just the culture and the communities that we are exposed to growing up. It allows us to have the ability to appreciate and to learn and practice music from other cultures, perhaps a little bit more accessibly. So what I really love about studying music theory in this way, where we delve into the natural laws, is that these laws are God-made. They are not invented by man. They are just like that. They exist this way, and they can't be changed by what we do as human beings, because we are not in control of that. And that's the beauty of it. We're studying about natural phenomenon and how we as human beings can take these things that have been given to us by the world, by God, and how we can take these things and create compositions, beautifully structured compositions that sound good to us. And then people can study the art of composition based on how we have structured these natural phenomena for centuries. And then we have two separate things. We have music theory and we have the art of composition. So I hope that's been eye-opening for you, and be a musician. Don't just be a machine. If you're a guitarist, don't just play certain finger positions on the fretboard. I want you to understand the music. And it's given me so much joy and so much more confidence as a musician. And I'm really happy to share this little nugget of information